Hey folks, welcome. Thank you very much for joining me. As I said in today's LinkedIn update, I appreciate you've got loads of choice, right? You could be out walking the dog, you could be having your lunch, maybe you are having your lunch and you're watching this. You could even be browsing stuff on the TV, right? Because it may be that period of the day where you decide to have a bit of me time. So whatever it is that you've chosen to sacrifice, I'm hoping that by the end of this session, you'll start to see that what you've done is make an investment in yourself and in your business. Because what I promised to share with you here is a strategy to help you to be able to double your revenues in the next 12 months. Or if you're a consultant running a desk, double your billings over the course of the next 12 months by focusing on three, what I would consider to be simple levers that when used with sophistication can have a significant impact on your results. Now, look, I need to acknowledge a few things, first of all. The first thing that needs to be said is I appreciate that it's been difficult. Like the last 12 months has been tough for many. So I don't wish to make light of the situation based upon what I'm going to share with you. I'm here with a genuine intent to be able to help you to recognize what are the things that are in your control that if you choose to do something about them, could start to have an impact on the quality of the results that you get. I'm not here to preach. I'm not here to make you do things that you don't want to do. At a very base level, if I share these three levers and you recognize I could see how these could help, I recognize the importance of them, you still have a choice, right? You can choose to continue to run your business or to manage your desk as you see fit. And as you see fit takes into account all of the variables, right? Everything that you've got going on in life, not just this thing called work. And although things have been tough out there, in the vast majority of marketplaces, there has been work, there has been recruitment taking place, there have been opportunities to be able to generate income, to be able to generate revenue. And I think that when we look at what we have created in terms of the business that has been written, it is always likely to be the minority of the business which is out there. There is not the equivalent of a Tesco's of recruitment who are hoovering up 30% of the market. In whatever space it is that you operate, you are likely to have competitors. And often when I talk to people in recruitment, they'll tell me about other sectors, about how other sectors look easier because their sector is highly competitive. And from the outside looking in, those other ones seem to have less competition. There appears to be less noise. The reality is, the more time you spend in your market, the more aware you are simply of the people whom you're competing against. What from the outside looking in looked like greener grass actually turns out to be no different. And if you're looking for greener grass, the greener grass tends to be where you choose to water it. So whatever it is that I share now, if you see this as being an opportunity to help you to water the grass that you are stood on a little more frequently with a bit more consistency, it will start to grow. It will start to produce results. There needs to be an element of faith and an element of belief in what you're doing. And there has to be the discipline to have decided if this is the goal, then this is what I'm willing to do to make it happen. In terms of me, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jeremy Snell. I got into recruitment in 1994. I spent a long time working as a consultant, 13 years hands-on doing the job of recruiting before I moved into learning and development and now run my own business, working as a coach with business owners, consultants, helping them to become more productive. And over the course of the last 12 years, maybe 13 years now, I would say that I've worked with somewhere in the region of 13 to 14,000 recruiters in hundreds and hundreds of businesses all over the world. And the one thing that I'll share with all of you, whatever the marketplace is that people operate in, whatever it is that they do in terms of the level that they operate at, everybody has a perception that their own personal and professional challenges are unique, when actually there is far more that brings us together in terms of commonality than there is that separates us. And that's why I feel these three levers, they are so portable across all sectors, across all industries, across all flavors of recruitment: temp recruitment, contract recruitment, permanent recruitment, interim recruitment. We see a lot of commentary that revolves around the way forward for recruitment is all about retained. If you're doing temp recruitment, if you're doing contract recruitment, There are ways to be able to achieve the same sorts of results without it having to be using the same type of vehicle. And when we recognize what the three levers are and we start to do something positive with those three different levers, we can start to see things move. So I'm going to share with you in a moment these three levers that drive revenue. Each of them stands alone. It's when we start to use them in combination together that we start to see a compound effect. In your business, on your desk, it may be that one lever needs to be worked first before you move to the second. And then working with the second lever sets things up for you to be able to start to work the third lever. So strategically, it's important you pick the right lever to begin with. Only you know your business well enough to decide which lever to pick. If we were to work together, if I were to coach you, helping you to grow your desk or to grow your business, we would start by identifying which lever is priority number one. And we'll establish some quick wins with priority one so that it feeds us with the encouragement to know that when we turn our attention to lever two, and then we move to lever three, we're going to see a sustained level of results based upon the energy and the discipline that we're putting into things. So these three levers, people, you can take these three levers and you can analyze your own business just simply on these three different metrics. And if you take each of these metrics and the performance measures that I share, you can then look at, what do I need to do? What do you need to do to be able to double your revenues, to be able to double your billings on your desk, so you can start to create what you would consider to be better, more encouraging results from the energy, the effort, and the emotional attachment that you put into this thing called running a business or doing this thing called a job. Is that all right? So let me share with you the first of these three levers. Because if we look at lever number one is your margin lever. And I hear a lot that there is margin compression. I hear a lot that businesses are becoming more cost conscious. I think many of these businesses who are making decisions about cost control in their business are looking at two different lists of potential vendors out there. They will have a list of people who are suppliers, and they will have a list of people who are partners. If you are seen as being a partner, you will probably come under more pressure than if you're seen as being a partner. So how you position yourself will help you to be able to maintain and improve a margin. So when we look at margin, we can measure margin as a percentage, like a gross margin percentage, or an introductory placement fee percentage, or we can look at margin in pounds. Whichever way you cut it, if you improve your margin by 25%, so that would be moving your average permanent placement fee from 16% to 20%, or moving your average permanent placement fee from £6,000 to 7,500. A 25% increase in your margin, when we introduce the other two levers, will have that compound effect to start to increase your revenues by 100%, by double. And there are different ways that you can consider your margin improvement. So if you're a temp recruiter, you could look at margin and consider ways to be able to create bookings which last longer. If your average booking is 31 days, you will therefore make a certain amount of margin over the lifetime of the booking. If you increase your booking so that the average booking becomes 62 days, you could start to double the amount of pound margin that you get access to. Many of the high-performing temp recruiters who I work with, many of the high-performing contract recruiters who I work with, focus on contract or temp booking duration to help them to be able to influence the average margin that they make per booking. So that doesn't require them to put extra pounds and pence onto the actual charge rate. It's ensuring that there is a greater longevity of booking. So maybe hunting down the right types of bookings with the right drivers, maybe identifying those clients who are building contingent workforces to help them to be able to mitigate some of the costs of rising employment may help you to be able to do that. Or if you're a perm recruiter and you feel in your infinite wisdom that you have capped out, that 20% is your marketplace's maximum, so therefore the concept of going to 25 seems crazy, then up the level at which you operate. if you up the average salary that you work on from 40,000 to 50,000 and you hold the line on your percentage introductory fee, you'll start to find that you are still influencing your margin by 25%. So the pricing one is the most emotive of the three levers. It is also the most transparent and easiest to be able to check to see what impact would it have. If retrospectively I went back over the last 11 months and every invoice that I sent increased in value by 25%, the margin. So that is the permanent placement fee went up by 25%, or the margin on that temp assignment went up by 25%. What impact would that have on my revenues? And you'll start to see growth. And at the moment, it'll be 25%. When we look at the second lever, when we start to do work on the second lever in combination with improving the margin, we'll now see an improvement on top of an improvement. And when we start to see an improvement on top of an improvement, and we look at something like conversion, as we increase our conversion rate, increasing our conversion rate of jobs worked to jobs filled. So if you currently fill 60% of the jobs that you touch and you increase that to 75%, and you are also increasing your average margin per job by 25%, the 25 on top of the 25, it now has a compound effect. And it may be that in your business, that the price lever is the one to start with, because there is a genuine opportunity to increase your average margin. Or it may be that you feel that your average margin is a line that you would want to seek to hold, and the real money is hidden in conversion. If we take the typical recruitment agency who are filling 30% of the jobs that they work on, increasing that by 25% is an extra 7.5%. So that's a fill rate of 37.5. So that means that we could still afford to not fill 62.5% of the jobs that we work on, but it still leaves us room to continue to grow. If your business is already fulfilling 100% of the jobs that it's working on, then perhaps the conversion of the leads into jobs themselves. So if we got better at being able to increase the bandwidth, the pipe of jobs, so that we give ourselves a greater level of conversion of prospects to customers, we'd start to be able to feed the same metric. So when we combine together price and we combine together conversion, we've got two really strong levers that could underpin the growth plan for your business for next year. And then when we take the third lever, and the third lever is sales velocity. Blah. Sales velocity, right? This is the speed at which things convert. So this could be the average time that it takes you to fill a job, or the average time that it takes you to land a job. So if you are winning one piece of retained work every 21 days, and you start to reduce that by 5 days, so we reduce it by 25%, we're now winning one every 15 days. And if we're winning one every 15 days, over the course of a year, we have more bandwidth to be able to deliver. So whether we're reducing the average time to hire, and let's say our average time to hire is 40 days from instruction through to invoice, and we can start to reduce that time scale, it'll help us to be able to deliver a greater number of assignments at a more attractive margin with a higher percentage of conversion. So there are two things there, people, that go up by 25%. If we could increase our margin by 25%, if we could increase our conversion by 25%, and if we could reduce the time to deliver, the sales velocity, the time to deliver the job, the average time to fill, by 25%, we now have more capacity in our calendar to be able to do more. And yes, I'm totally with you, right? If you're thinking, well, this requires there to be enough supply out there. Totally right. There needs to be enough supply out there. We have to think more shrewdly about how do we build a machine, a process, a business that helps us to be able to scale. And I'm not talking about automations and drip campaigns. I'm talking about a more thought out sales strategy to help us to be able to identify the right people in the right organizations with the right problems, who will value those solutions to help us to be able to feed our business with the right clients instructing us with the right work so that we're delivering projects that help us to be able to influence gross margin upwards, measured in pounds or measured in percent. Personally, I prefer pounds because that's what I'm going to tend to spend, to look at the conversion of the work that we have opportunities to actually get involved with. That is the conversion of those jobs from being instructions to filled, and the speed with which we do it. Now, I appreciate that all of the variables that exist out there that could be perceived as being the barriers, they exist. They may be things that we would describe as being outside of our control. When we look at the things that are inside of our control and we embrace what these three levers can do for us, we can start to set some goals. And from those goals, set some priorities as to which lever do we need to focus on first. And if we focus on that lever for the next quarter, and we start to see the movement that we are anticipating based upon the effort that we put into it, and we can then hold the line on improving that lever, we can then move to the next lever. And we can do more work on that lever for the next quarter and start to incrementally increase the quality of results we get from that lever. So we now have two levers working in our favor before we then turn our attention to the third. And each time we do that, there is an opportunity to keep revisiting each lever. And each time we revisit those levers, there is an opportunity for ascension. And ascension is something that we see happen for consultants in their jobs, right? We see them join recruitment, and notionally, let's say in their first year, they bill 120 to 150,000 pounds in margin, temp or perm based margin. The second year, we see an incremental increase. The third year, we see an incremental increase. Much of that is linked to the external factors that they are starting to become more accustomed to. Who are the best clients? Where am I going to be able to find my candidates? How do I start to be able to manage my processes in a more productive fashion? And as they unconsciously work those three levers, their productivity increases. And at some point, they arrive at a plateau, and that plateau is driven by the systems and the processes that they're following that ultimately are linked to their level of conscious control over the three levers that I've described. So, folks, I hope everyone is at least on the bus to recognize that these three levers matter. Whatever your thoughts are about the possibility in your marketplace of being able to double the revenues of your business in the next 12 months, that's with you for the moment. As long as you can appreciate that these three levers will have an impact on what next year could look like for you. And you recognize that the margin that you have, the conversion of your jobs, and your sales velocity to make those conversions happen, those are the three things that are within your control that if we focused on them with more attention, would start to help us to realize the results that we're looking for as a recruiter. So the home fun rather than homework is when you have an idle 2 minutes, rather than doom scrolling on LinkedIn or looking for something to get involved with on TikTok. Why don't you have a look at the revenues for this year and just do a retrospective what if? What if the pound margin was up by 25%? What if the conversion of jobs was up by 25%? And what if the velocity of those jobs, i.e. the speed to fill, was reduced by 25%? How much extra capacity would that give me? Because that means that in the 10 months that it's taken to get here, I would have been able to have got there in 7.5 months, which then gives me an additional 2.5 months to do the same level of work again. Do you get what I mean? So I sincerely hope that everyone's with me on this. Buying that as a concept, you owe it to yourself to recognize the things that are in your control that will have the biggest difference on your desk or your business. It then becomes your decision as to how much action you want to take on it, right? So as long as everyone is happy, I'm happy. But let me move to share what I would see as being some of the internal barriers, because there are definitely things that we can change. I can't change the economy. But I think if I go into 2025 waiting for the economy to influence my business, I might serve myself better if I start to think about how my business can influence my local economy and start to take more ownership of things. Because the moment I let go of things and start to give them to other people, and they become the source of my problems, it disempowers me. I need to look at the things that I actually can influence, the things that I can do differently. Most businesses' problems, their perception is it's outside the window, it's out there somewhere. It's uncertainty, it's volatility, it's politics, it's Brexit, it's stuff, right? And I'm not arguing that those things aren't things that we should be thinking about. However, if we're blaming those things for the state of our business without actually looking at the things that are in our control that we can change to influence our business, we might miss opportunities. That's my worry. And sometimes I worry about that more than some of the people who running their businesses are worrying about it. And yeah, I think if people slow down a little bit to actually look at what are the things that are of concern to me, what are the things that I can actually change on that list, and then build a strategy as to how do I change the things that actually are in my control. And they always say, as a heuristic, control the controllables. And we only have 3 things that we can control, people. What we choose to focus on, how much energy we put into it, and what we're willing to accept. So if I focus on moaning about things outside of my control, and I put a lot of energy into doing that online and offline, and I'm willing to accept the fact that if other people agree with me, then it must be a rule, and therefore it helps give me permission to accept that this is the way that it is, I lose a little bit of my own control. I lose a lot of my control. So there are elements that we can change. And there are things that we can change if we start to recognize what actually are our challenges. And when we look at what our challenges are, one that has to be acknowledged is the level of sameness that exists in clients' perceptions of the recruitment industry. All too frequently, I hear anecdotally from recruiters about clients' perceptions that all agencies are and clump them all together. Anecdotally, I can't help but feed back to you the number of posts that take place on LinkedIn where there are good quality recruiters, professional recruiters talking about their perceptions of clients' perceptions of the recruitment industry, about how they feel it is the wrong decision for clients to choose to instruct 3 agencies and to create that first past the post mentality. Yet every day 3 agencies are joining in with that. And just because you think that it's wrong doesn't stop somebody else from joining in. And if the client sees that people continue to join in, but maybe the names of the businesses willing to join in changes, they might still be getting what they feel is the service that a recruitment agency offers. So we can get caught in this. We can get caught in this sea of sameness. It's really important we think about how we differentiate ourselves. Otherwise, we end up being judged in the same way simply because of our job title. And you may have tried to do something quirky. You may have called your agency the Golden Lobster and tried to be everything that you can to be different. But if at the point of engagement with your prospects, you look the same, you sound the same, you want the same, you are the same. And sameness is what is having an impact on many people's pricing strategies. Sameness is what is having an impact on many people's conversion ratios, because they are being treated the same as other vendors that in their heart they know aren't as, whatever word you want to use, good, quality, customer centric. But these are difficult things to be able to communicate to people because it becomes an opinion. So it's important that we look for ways to be able to create differentiation as opposed to betterment. In the first episode of my podcast, so the podcast is now 30 episodes in. If you go back to episode number 1, if you haven't consumed it, it's all about how to be able to get out of this particular place, how to be able to avoid the comparisons of sameness. And if I was ever so critical, it sometimes accidentally gets invited by the business because the business didn't start with a plan of how do we create separation and differentiation. So that's the first of the problems. The second is suffering from feast and famine syndrome. being really busy, lots of work, getting focused on delivering all of that work, then completing all of the work, then having to return back to doing some business development. And we can have a great month, followed by an average month, followed by a not so good month, followed by a great month. And we see these cycles. And I hear people talk about the recruitment roller coaster. Most frequently, I think the roller coaster has been built by the person who's riding it. Their systems and their processes have created the big gaps between the peaks and the troughs. And feast and famine then puts pressure on people in terms of their sales activity and worse, their sales decisions. And because it puts pressure on their sales decisions, they compromise themselves. They compromise themselves on role, they compromise themselves on client, they compromise themselves on pricing. And as they compromise themselves on those things, the elements that I'm talking about increasing by 25%, they go backwards. Average margin goes backwards, conversion goes backwards, and time to actually complete something extends. Because things start to come to pass that if we'd have been honest with ourselves at the beginning, we could have predicted because of the client's behavior were likely to happen. So we become a victim of feast and famine that makes it more difficult to feel as though we have control over those levers. We are at our most confident, we are at our most powerful when things are going great. Yet often that is when the least amount of sales activity is taking place, when really our chemistry set is at its best. A guy I was with last week, George last week, in that week, did 4 well-structured placements in that week. And he could feel how well things were going. And he said when he was doing his sales calls, the level at which he was speaking, the level of confidence that he had, the belief in himself, all helped him to be able to win what he described as being better than normal work because of how he was projecting, because of how he felt. He was doing the right things when he was at the top, rather than waiting until he could feel the slide and then starting to look for the next client, who starts to become far more attractive when we've got less work on, even though they may not be our definition of the ideal customer. So if we get caught in this sea of sameness and we're caught in feast and famine, it just creates mega compromise. And when we feel compromised, we start to come across as either being needy or we become a very transactional seller. And because we become a transactional seller, the perception is what we're looking for is an opportunity to make some money. We're looking for some jobs. And that isn't necessarily the type of relationship that some of these organizations are looking to build. But it is the type of relationship that some of these organizations are looking to build. Does that make sense? So we end up attracting those who actually like the selling style because it suits with their buying style. And I'm a big believer that we tend to buy in the same way that we sell, and vice versa. So if we come across as being transactional and needy, we may actually find that we encourage clients to want to work with us because that is what attracts them, because they can see this is an opportunity to continue to behave the way that they've always behaved and to potentially have a supplier who they can turn on and turn off, talk to and not talk to, instruct and tell what to do, because they now have the power. And they like to be a buyer of power that sometimes means they're a bit of a bully. And if they become a bit of a bully and they enjoy being a bully, why would they go and work with somebody who actually is looking to create some level ground and pushes back to the bully? So we do tend to attract the types of customers that we are projecting in terms of our values and how we operate, that would actually see us as being supplier of choice. And I try to be polite as I describe that. There are plenty of organizations out there that we could not convince to be able to do things to a better standard because it doesn't suit their buying style and their buying persona or the objectives of their business. So it doesn't matter how good you think you are at being able to convince them to do something different. They probably won't, and they will continue to do business with those who will accept the conditions that are on offer. Because remember, we can only control what we choose to focus on, how much energy we put into it, and what we're willing to accept. And if we start to compromise ourselves on the quality of clients that we engage with, on the processes that we follow, the prices that we're willing to work at, the red flags that we see that we push to one side because What if I find somebody, or I can even think of somebody. I wouldn't normally work on this job, but you know what? I'll take it. I'll take it because I can think of somebody. And we're dreaming of all of the reasons why this is going to be quick and easy, only to discover all of the confirmations that prove to us that our gut feel at the beginning was probably right. But we got better at talking ourselves into doing it rather than talking ourselves out of it. So those three things, it makes me sound a little bit negative, people. I would consider myself to be a positive realist. And I do think that there are things that we can do. There are things that are so in our control that we can start to do that make a difference. They make a difference with that sameness which is out there. Or in fact, probably what I need to label better as being clients' perception of sameness that we sometimes endorse. Because you believe that you're different. Everybody believes that they're different. Yet it becomes difficult to be able to communicate that because what ends up coming out sounds same. At best, it sounds like a description of we are better. And that's only going to start to change when you change your positioning. We move out of the red ocean into the blue ocean. Podcast episode number 1 that I recorded for the 4D recruitment method is about positioning. It's about getting out of the red ocean, getting into a blue ocean, starting to redefine what it is that you do to shift people's perception of your value, to shift people's perceptions of your offering so that it becomes more difficult to compare you to others. Because if everybody else looks like a duck and sounds like a duck and you don't, it's very difficult to treat you like a duck. And it may be I've yet to encounter people who are like you, so I learn as I go forwards what is the best way to behave with you, and I start to learn the rules based upon how we structure our relationship. Whether you're a temp recruiter, a contract recruiter, or a perm recruiter, whether your business has been going for 12 months or it's been going for 30 years, there is an opportunity to be able to reposition yourself. Reposition yourself and stay in the same market. Reposition yourself and shift to a different market. Because if you genuinely believe there's no money where you are, why don't you go where it is? And if I think about the team that I was with 2 weeks ago, 3 years ago, they had an average placement fee in their team of £6,000. They had a fill rate of their jobs that was hovering at around 28 to 35%. The vast majority of their jobs they picked up with a transactional sales process, which was a job on the back of a client who they knew was hiring, biting on a speculative CV. And they said, this is the way that it is, Jeremy, because that's just how these firms in the City of London operate, and that's how our competitors operate. And that was 2 years ago. Today they now have an average fee in their business of £15,800. 70% of their business is paid upfront as retained business. And they now have created a different position. That there is still the bear pit of stuff going on that they were caught up in, but now they've changed their positioning. They haven't changed their client base. They haven't changed the name of their business. They haven't changed their branding. What they have changed is their brand relative to the position that they place themselves as being the solution to a different set of problems. So their positioning has become everything for them. And that's meant that the team, over the course of the last 2 years, has seen a 250% increase in margin, in billings, in revenue, without a sizable increase in headcount, apart from 2 people. The majority of that has come from recognizing the sea of sameness that they were in and creating a conscious plan as to how they were going to change it. That is just as possible in your business and on your desk. It is just as possible as an employed consultant working in a business where everyone else can continue to be in the sea of sameness and you choose to be somebody different. Because it's how we project ourselves. It's how we position ourselves. For the 3rd time I'll say it, bears repeating, check out episode number 1 of the podcast. It takes 20 minutes. There is a lot of stuff in there to help you to reposition yourselves. The second thing that we can do is we can make a sales process which is more effective and start to break down our sales process so that we have a better strategy as to how we generate leads, how we qualify those leads, how we start to engage with those leads, and how we convert it into business. And we have a better sales strategy as to how we focus on our existing customers, start to become more embedded with those customers, set a better plan as to how we increase the quality of those relationships so that we can move ourselves in terms of positioning to become more valuable, to be able to move away from a suppliers list to become part of a partners list. So we're less likely to be on the receiving end of cost-based driven initiatives pointed at their own suppliers. When I get invited to do sales training in business, I regularly get emails, particularly the last 6 months, regularly get emails saying, Jeremy, we need some help with our sales. We need to increase clients. We need to be able to get more jobs, whatever the kind of perception of the problem is. And the perception of the problem leads to people need to become more confident at selling. As if confidence in selling comes from something which is outside the business, when really what they need is a better process for people to follow so that there is a stronger wireframe to actually say, this is our sales process. When we follow this process from here to here with this level of consistency, this is what we expect as an outcome. And now that we've set a standard and we have something to be able to follow, we can now work on improving our performance, which is the sophistication with which we follow that process. All too often, business owners tell me that they don't really have a sales process, but they just want the training. It's really difficult to go in and train people to become better salespeople on top of no process that exists. To really have an impact with some sales training, there needs to be greater clarity on what actually is the process that we're going to follow. And then the third thing that we can do, we can become more consistent with how we build our pipeline. And if we become more consistent with how we create a pipeline, we can start to increase the bandwidth of the pipeline. And when we start to get our marketing right, when we get our business development right, we now have something that we can dial up and we can dial down. And when we know how to be able to manage our portfolio of live customers and be able to recognize the trigger points as to when we need to start to up the marketing and when we need to start to dial down the marketing so that we have the right feed of information that is converting into leads, we should be able to reduce the peaks and the troughs, the feasts and the famines, to create something that's more consistent. So there are definitely answers out there, people. These are wicked problems. And because they're wicked problems, we don't always spend enough time slowing down to think about what actually become the priorities. Whatever you choose to do based upon what I've shared here, 4 really simple things that I would recommend that you do. Number 1, decide what is your goal for next year? What does that look like in terms of revenue? What actually do you want to see your desk or your business produce? 2, looking at the 3 levers that I've shared. Which one is priority 1 for the first quarter of the year? Which is going to have the most significant impact on your ability to be able to improve the results? Number 3, start to look at when that lever moves, what do I need to do to bring the second lever into play? How will I recognize that I've arrived at the right point? So set yourself a milestone, set some goals and set some objectives. And number 4, build a plan that gives you something to focus on, because when you can focus on a plan, you are controlling a controllable. And when you focus on the plan and you want the goal enough, you now access the discipline that is required to be able to make it happen. And discipline is something that sits inside all of us. So there was also a LinkedIn Live that I did a couple of months ago that was about the 8 habit stack. Discipline was part of that habit stack. If you attended it and you remember it and you want to refresh on it, go back. The recording sits inside YouTube. Or if you haven't seen it and you want to be able to dig a little bit deeper in how to be able to create more discipline in what you do to be able to run your business, check it out here on LinkedIn or go to YouTube to be able to see it. So I hope everyone's happy with the way that I've described these things. And if you've got some questions or some thoughts about what I'm sharing, I'd welcome the opportunity to be able to answer them. But there's also an opportunity that if this is something that you would want to have more help with, if this is something that you'd want to be able to do together, you can join my coaching program. My coaching program will help you and I work together to review your business, to look at where you're at, to identify which of these levers is going to have the quickest return for you. How do we start to get you some quick wins so that you can start to see how much control you have over the growth of your business? And then as we start to create those quick wins, build out a plan so that you now have a roadmap to be able to follow to help you to be able to make 2025 a more profitable year by focusing on the things that are in your control that could help you to be able to influence those revenues. And I know it sounds bold to say to double it. 25% increase in margin, pounds or percent, 25% increase in conversion of work, whether that is conversion of prospects to buying customers or jobs converting from being instructions to placements, and reducing the average time that it takes to be able to arrive at a point of a sale. So that is reducing the time that it takes to fill a job by 25%, or reducing the time that it takes to be able to onboard each new client by 25%. 25 up, 25 up, 25 down, compound effect, 100% more. So if this is something that you're interested in exploring, if this is something that you feel I'm talking with sense, if you feel as though I'm talking with sense, but you're still left with questions like, is that going to be possible in my market? I don't know, because I don't really know where you're at, what you're doing, and how good you are with what you're doing, and therefore what opportunity there is to be able to improve. But I reckon if you were to answer the questions that take less than a minute to answer associated with this QR code, I'd be able to give you a definite answer as to whether I could help, how I could help, and then we could have a conversation to talk about what that could look like. I've got capacity to be able to help 12 people, with enough attention to be able to guide them through this process so that they can start to get the results that they want. If you've got some curiosity to find out if there's a synergy between us, if you want to ask me some questions, if you'd like to be able to get some answers as to whether I'd be able to do that for you, take a moment or two, grab this QR code, answer those questions, and then we can have a conversation. And if you have any questions about any of the things that I've shared here, I'm more than happy to answer those questions. You can drop me a direct message here on this little old platform called LinkedIn. You can drop me an email, jeremy@4drecruitmentmethod.com. I'll answer any questions that you've got, because, I'm genuinely here to help. I've spent a long time working in this industry. It served me really well, and I feel that I'm here to serve it back. So whatever it is that I can do, whatever questions it is that you have, and if you've got that curiosity to see what life could be like for us to work together in more proximity, I'd really like the opportunity to do that too. So thank you very much indeed for your attendance. Thank you very much indeed for your attention. Thank you very much indeed for choosing to be here rather than being somewhere else. Normal service will resume. I'll keep on doing my LinkedIn updates. I'll keep on sharing my podcast. I'll keep on sharing my newsletter. I look forward to hearing from you in the not too distant future. Whatever it is you've got to do today, do so with some personal power, right? Focus on the things that are in your control. Think about what you would really like next year to do for you. And rather than dreaming about it, rather than pinning the hopes on that happening, links to events that are outside of your control, think about the 3 levers. Start to put together a model as to how that could happen. And I know if you do that, with or without my help, with those 3 levers as a strategy, you'd start to be able to identify the tactics that could help you to get there. If you want to make it happen quicker, I'm over here ready to talk. See you soon.